Hello and welcome to a special video of my podcast all about knitting and crochet and my yarn shop here in Wiesbaden, Germany. I'm Kiko and today is January 4th, 2023. And this special video will be all about the gnomes that I knit in the Year of Gnomes 2022. As most of you will know, Sarah Shearer, who designs gnomes all the times, had declared 2022 as the Year of Gnomes as she realized at the end of 2021 that she had exactly 12 published patterns of gnomes on the market at that point in time. So she decided to re-knit her own patterns, one every month, in the same color palette, which I think is a great idea. And she thought maybe it'd be fun to have some people join in. So she just declared 2022 as the Year of Gnomes and invited everybody to join her in knitting gnomes. And whoever knitted a gnome within a month could fill out a form on her website and then be part of a something where she draws names and then you can get a gift, you can win something. Lost for words at the moment. But anyway, it's not that much about winning prizes, but it's just about the fun of knitting gnomes. So I decided, as soon as I heard about it, I decided I'll join in and I'll be knitting a gnome every month. And that's what I did. And if you've watched any episode in 2022 of my podcast, you will have seen a gnome probably, and you will know about the Year of Gnomes. But I thought it'd be fun to just show them in one video and just see what I managed to do gnome related, or which gnomes I knit in 2022. By the way, you won't see the video. It will now probably be a lot later when you see the video than January, because I am planning on holding onto the video until I can go on a vacation, have a holiday, and then when I can't film a proper episode, I can release this episode, and then you have something you can watch. And then you might not remember all the gnomes as clearly as I do right now, because I only just finished knitting the last one. Yeah, so I think that's it with the explanations. Let's get started. I started off in January 22 with Natasha, which is one of the gnomes out of the Never Not Gnoming pattern, which is actually the first pattern that Sarah ever published. Not her first ever published pattern, but the first gnome pattern that she published. And the Never Not Gnoming pattern has 3 different gnomes, and 2 of those I knit during 22, and this one was the first one. And the yarn I used is the Alpaca Silk Blend by Hansa Farm, and this is a leftover yarn from a pair of wrist warmers that I knit. Yeah, I think I used 3 colors. I used those 3 colors for the wrist warmers, and then I knit another pair of wrist warmers. And the last color I have left over in that yarn, I don't even know what that was left over from. But anyway, so this is Natasha. This was January. And then in January, I also decided that if it's the Year of Gnomes, I might as well go ahead and finally knit the Go Big or Go Gnome pullover, which is a pullover that Sarah designed with gnomes on them. And as I don't enjoy knitting swatches so much, and she also designed a hat called Go Big or Go Gnome hat, I thought it'd be fun to knit the hat as a gauge swatch. So that's what I did. Right in January, I knit this hat. I used Westfalenwolle, which is a German yarn that's produced in Germany from German sheep. It's undyed and unprocessed, so it's not machine washable. It's a fairly rustic wool, but it's very warm and I like it a lot. So I thought it'd be fun to have a pullover out of that yarn, and if that pullover had gnomes on it, it would make the whole thing perfect. So I looked at the hat pattern. I realized the gauge was completely different, but you can make things work. A hat is not so big. So I chose one of the baby sizes, or the baby size, I don't remember, and I knit the baby sized gnomes, and I really like the hat. The problem is just it's too small for me. So I knit another hat, which I gave away, so I can't show it to you, using the white Westphalen yarn and some other colors for the gnomes. For the second hat, I used the 8-ply sock yarn because that goes really well with the Westphalen Wolle. But with this hat, I used the normal sock yarn held double. So if you look at the floats, you can see that all the colorful floats consist out of 2 strands of yarn. Yep, if I was able to pull them apart, you could see it. There we go. So these are 2 strands of yarn that I held double, and the same with this. I can't remember if I used 2 different colors that I just mixed, or if it was the same color yarn that I just held double. I don't remember, but I really like the effect that I got. So I will probably at some point knit a pullover out of Westphalen Wolle with some color work with sock yarn. But yeah, for this hat, it was just the hat itself is too small. And then I realized that changing the numbers for a hat is not a big thing. But if I had knitted the pullover out of this yarn, I would have had to change so much in the pattern that it would have been like designing my own pullover. And I didn't really feel like doing that. So I put that idea to the side and started thinking about our alternatives. So that was January, and then in February I knit Norbert, who is the big gnome out of the Never Not Gnoming pattern. So it's the same yarn again, it's the alpaca silk yarn, so they're so soft and cuddly and yeah, very special. With these two you can see they are sort of related, they resemble each other, but there are 2 beard options in the pattern, so I did the bottom up beard on this one and the side to side beard on Norbert. Yeah, really happy with these. And then in March I knit another gnome out of the same yarn, but I used the pattern No Fun Like Gnome Fun. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the biggest gnome or one of the 2 big gnomes in No Fun Like Gnome Fun. Noah is the one that can stand, and Naomi is the one that you hang as an ornament. You'll get to see her later. And the third gnome in this pattern is Niblet, and you'll see that one later too, because this is the most used pattern by me in 22, so you'll be hearing that pattern a lot. And by the way, for Noah, I decided to knit the beard out of mohair silk yarn. So there's a lot of silk in this little guy, but I love the way the beard is fuzzy and hairy. So I think he's perfect. And he will probably move in with my sister because she fell in love with him as well. So that was March. And then also in March, I cast on for the next hat, the Go Big or Go Gnome hat. That was supposed to be a gauge swatch for the pullover to be knitted later. So I cast it on in March. I finished it in April. So I'll first show you the April gnome and then I'll show you the hat. In April, I decided to knit Nora from Gnome Pun Intended. That was the only pattern that I hadn't knit before 2022. So because the Never Not Gnoming gnomes I had knit before, I'd just given them away. So I wanted to knit them again, so I'd have them for myself again. But Gnome Pun Intended, Nora, I had never knit before. So that was the first time to knit this pattern, and I think she's fantastic. She has a fairly big body compared to her hat, compared to most other gnomes, but that's okay. The hat is fantastic. It was inspired by the sorting hat out of Harry Potter. It's a lot of work, but it's absolutely worth it because it's so much fun. And I just simply love the beard. So the beard is completely knitted, and then you unravel several stitches, and then you get those fantastic looking thingies. Again, I used leftover sock yarn by Opal. The hat color I knit a dragon out of. Gave that away, so I have to knit another dragon at some point. I think I knit socks out of this color. probably. Don't remember what I did with this color. Yeah, but this is Nora. And then in April, as I said, I finished the Go Big or Go Gnome hat. And this is what this looks like. So the yarn is normal sock yarn, so it's sock weight or fingering weight yarn. You can see the gnomes look, I mean, they're basically the same gnomes, but there are more rounds to these gnomes. So they have a bit of a different look because you have a lot more stitches for each gnome. And I chose the solid color is an opal color, and the red, pink and the blue color are out of the Beauty series. So that's a bit softer than the normal opal sock yarn. And yeah, I thought that'd be a nice combination to knit as a pullover and as a hat. And when I started the hat, I almost chose a smaller needle because normally for hats, I would go down with the needle size, but then I remembered that this is supposed to be a gauge swatch. And for my pullovers, I like to have them knitted more loosely. So I usually use a 4mm needle for the fingering weight yarn because I'm a fairly tight knitter, but my knitting tends to be more loose with the color work because I always keep the floats so loose that the whole thing loosens up. This is what the floats look like. I think they're quite okay, but you can see that they are long enough for the hat to be stretchy. So that makes my stitches more loose in color work than with one color knitting. So I used the 3.5mm needle for the ribbing and for the color work, and a 4mm needle for the rest of the hat. And then I was really happy with what this looked like, and I decided I was going to knit the pullover in these colors with this gauge. It's not exactly spot on with the pattern, but I think I just went down a size that I wanted to knit. So I adjusted, I just did the maths, and with these numbers I was able to pick the right number of stitches for the pullover. So that was April. And then in May, I knit a new pattern because Sarah just can't stop designing mystery gnomes. So we buy the pattern, we know we're going to get a gnome, we know how many colors we're going to need, but we have no idea what the gnome is going to look like. So May was Gnocchi. The pattern is called Make No Mistake, and that was her 9th mystery knit along. And this is what Gnocchi looks like. I was a bit confused that she didn't have arms, but I got used to that. I really like the color work in the hat. She has again she has this tangly beard, and Sarah said if we wanted we could put little beads in the ends of the beards, which I thought was a fantastic idea, and I put little beads in. A friend of mine was in my shop when she did the beard because she had a bit of trouble with the pattern, so I helped her, and then she forgot the beads that she wanted to put in, so I looked at my beads and I offered some that I had, and then she actually chose little stars, the tiny little beads that look like stars, and she put them in the beard, and I thought that's such a good idea. So I really wanted to knit another one so I could put the stars. At some point I'm going to have a gnome with stars in its beard, so that's going to be fun. The yarn I used is from Wolldackel, it's a German hand dyer, and I had a advent calendar with 20-gram minis in 2020, I think. 22 I had the other minis, 21 I had big skeins, and then 20. This must have been the advent calendar 2020. So I used 2 of those for the pink and the light blue, and the dark blue. I think the dark blue is a leftover yarn from the Stephen Westshore that I once knit, also from Wolldackel yarn. And the nose and the beard is leftover yarn from Mondschaf. That was yarn that I bought for another gnome. So that was May. Then in June, I knit Gnathan. And Gnathan is, the pattern is called Not Just Another Gnome. And when that was a mystery knit along, I chose colors that I thought I wasn't going to use for myself, for something that I would wear. So I thought it'd be fun to put it in a gnome, and that was okay. But I always felt like knitting another version of Gnathan in colors that I like more. And I realized I'd never knit a glittery gnome before, and I had never knit a cotton gnome before. So Gnathan has a lot of firsts. It's the first cotton gnome, it's the first glittery gnome. This is the glitter cotton by Schachenmeier. I think it's called Catania glitter or something, and that was quite fun too. It's a different feeling, I think, and I don't really enjoy knitting the cotton this tightly, but it has to be knitted tightly so the stuffing doesn't show. But I think that worked out really well, and I'm very, very happy with my Gnathan. And the very interesting thing that happened in August is that I went to a yarn festival in Düsseldorf, and I actually got to meet Sarah Shearer. And she said, whoever comes to the yarn festival can bring a gnome and we can take pictures together. So I actually have a picture of Sarah and one of her gnomes and Gnathan and me. So that was really special. That's Gnathan. Then July came around and I was ill for quite some time, so I didn't have a lot of time to knit. So when I realized the month was almost gone and I hadn't knit a gnome yet, I decided to go for a very little, small gnome, and that's where Niblet comes in. And Niblet is so tiny you can wear him as an earring, which means he usually comes along as a pair. And the colors are the same colors that I used for the Go Big or Go Gnome hat, which are the same colors that I then used for the pullover. So now I can wear the whole outfit of pullover, hat and earrings, which I did in one of my podcast episodes. And that was quite fun. So that was July. Then August, I decided to knit Nikki. Nikki was one of the gnomes that I gave away and then never replaced, just like the Never Not Gnoming gnomes. So, and also when I first knit Nikki, she was also a mystery knit along gnome. And did I say nice to gnome you? And even though I liked the colors that I used for her, I wasn't too happy with the way the colors came together because she's knit with the yarn held double. And of course, it's a mystery, so you don't know beforehand. You can't plan your colors for that. So even though she was quite pretty and the person who got her was really happy with her, I decided to knit another version of her and being able to plan the colors in the ways they are going to come together. So this is my second version of Nikki. And these are all colors that I like a lot. I think they're all leftover yarns from something. And the white with the speckles is a Wolldackel yarn, and then this light blue with speckles as well. The darker, like teal color is opal yarn. I think that are the three colors that were called for. And for the beard and nose, I was supposed to hold this color double, but I decided to double it with the white. For one, I didn't have a lot of that color, and also that meant that the beard and nose would be a bit whiter than if I had held the colorful yarn doubled. The hands are also in the same combination as the beard and the nose, but Nikki has this wonderful pouch pocket, or I don't know what you call it, she can put her hand in. And I really like the way the colors come together. The differences aren't very big, so it's not very easy to see the color difference between here and here, but I like this about her. And really happy with my, what was it, August gnome. Then in September, we got the next pattern. So there was another mystery gnome in September. The pattern is called Choose Your Gnome Adventure. That was her 10th mystery knit along. And Choose Your Gnome Adventure meant she was going to give us options. She didn't tell us beforehand how many options we were going to get, but I knew there'd be several hat options, body options, noses, beards, what have you. So I decided if there are so many options, I'm not just going to knit one because I probably won't be able to choose. So it'd be great to have two different ones. And also I thought it'd be nice to have another really big gnome. Oh, and by the way, with the Choose Your Gnome adventure, you could choose between two sizes. So I thought I'll do a little fingering weight one in the smaller size, and I'll use the Westfalen Wolle again for the bigger size. When I knit the mystery gnome in December 2021, I decided to knit one out of Westfalen Wolle and out of fingering weight yarn, not knowing that that pattern actually had 2 gnomes in it. So that December I had to knit 4 gnomes. But I really like the look of the Westfalen Wolle gnome, so I decided to do that again. And the first one that I finished was certainly the smaller one because there was less knitting to be done. And actually the pattern contains 5 different options for the hat, 5 different options for the body. There are 3 beard options. I think there's just 1 nose, so there isn't much to choose there. And I think for the arm there were just 2 options. So these are the options that I chose for the fingering weight. What's his name? Norton. And then the Westfalen gnome was just with the big size. He just would have been way too big, and I would have ended up using way too much yarn. So I did the beginning as per pattern, but then at some point I decided the hat's big enough, and I'll have him a bit shorter than he's supposed to be. But then he has this huge big body. This is so he has the 2-color beard with the fringes, and then this is the single color beard without fringe. This is the, oh yeah, there were 2 nose options. That's it, a round one and an oblong one, but there's just 1 size for the nose. So the small ones have big noses and the big ones have fairly small noses. And then there were 2 options for the arms. You could do with the contrast color stripe. There's a tiny contrast color stripe, and the hand is sort of the normal size hands that most of the gnomes have, and he has the big hands. So he has like a little fist, but he's a very peaceful gnome. And I think I should have used the dark color for the bottom, but I ran out of yarn. So I chose to use up the light gray. And I put into this gnome, I put a round box that I had. I put some stones in it so it'd be heavy enough to stay where it was. And yes, I think he's so funny. I really, really like him. And he usually sits on top of this shelf. And the last couple of months, he had Noah sitting on his hat like this. So I just love those 2 together. I think that's the only reason that I'm going to be sad to see him go. But that's okay. He can be friends with all the other gnomes as well. So that was, what did I say? That was September with another mystery gnome and a month where I knit 2 gnomes. And then the next one was October. And there I decided to knit another version of the Here We Gnome Again pattern. That was the first gnome pattern I ever bought. It's used to be the one that I had knit most. Changed last December, but this is the Here We Gnome Again pattern, and this is the second time I knit out of fingering weight. All the other ones like this one are bigger, and I had knit one in fingering weight before, but that was turned into a Gnandalf because my son requested one, and for that I think I used a 2.5 millimeter needle. And for this one, I decided to use a 2.0 millimeter needle just to see how small it would be. And I love the look of him. I didn't enjoy the knitting, so I probably won't be making any more in this size. I will probably make more fingering weight sizes because I really, really love the pattern. But then I'll be either using a 2.25 millimeter needle or the 2.5 millimeter needle that I usually use. But still love this. I think Nancy is her name. So that was October. Then in November, November is the month that my sister has her birthday. and somebody had the idea that I could knit a gnome for her birthday. And I think the idea was she liked the colors that I was knitting for my pullover so much. And a friend of mine suggested I knit a gnome in these colors to hold next to the pullover. And then my sister got really shiny eyes when she heard the idea of having a gnome in these colors. And I said, do you want to have the gnome? And she said, yes, please. And then I let her pick the pattern that she wanted her gnome to be. And I wasn't surprised when she picked the pattern, no pun intended, because she'd already liked the other one that I knit, but these are completely not her colors. And the only other request she had was if there was a way to make it smaller, because this is the first, no pun intended, gnome that I knit. And then I said to her, well, this is the 6-ply sock yarn, so if I use the fingering weight from my pullover, it will naturally be smaller. And then I again knit with the 2.0 millimeter needle to make sure it got as small as possible. And then after I finished knitting the gnome as per pattern, I actually undid the bottom and pulled out some of the body that I had knit and knit a new bottom to make him even smaller than the pattern called for. His beard is really very curly, but my sister likes that. And so this is what the gnome and the hat look like next to each other. And I think the resemblance is very, very clear. And I really like those together. And then also in November, I finally finished my Go Big or Go Gnome pullover. And this is what this looks like. The pattern has these little mushrooms at the bottom of the pullover. And that was the first time I used the leatherback jacquard method, I think is what it's called, where you create new stitches at the back of the pullover. And then with the floats that you are having, so the color that you're not using in the front, you can knit those extra stitches. So your floats never get longer than from one of those stitches to the other. And it makes it really very, very stretchy. It's a lot more stretchy than it needs to be for the bottom of a pullover, but I think that's okay. It's a lot better than having it too tight. And as this is a fairly small pattern, it meant I got to practice the technique without having a huge big pattern. And then with the gnomes, I didn't do it again because it is a lot of work, because you have more stitches and you have to pay more attention if those extra stitches are not in your pattern. And the way from one point to the other is a lot shorter in these gnomes than it is, for example, down here from one mushroom stem to the other. So I felt I don't need the technique up here. Yeah, but pullover is done, hat is done, the earrings, and then my sister's gnome. So November was a very successful month as well, gnome-wise. But then December came around. And then December had another mystery gnome. So that's Sarah's 11th mystery gnome. And if I understand it correctly, she plans to release 3 new mystery gnomes every year for the foreseeable future. So that should be really interesting. For December, yeah, we knit, what's her name? Nova. So Nova is a new gnome in the village where all the gnomes live. The December gnomes have stories with them, so you get to know a little bit about their history and how they live and their traditions and things. And then with Nova, again, Sarah tries to keep it a mystery for as long as possible. So basically we knit 3 hats. 2 of them were proper hats, and this one we weren't quite sure what it was, but people were thinking, are we knitting several gnomes again? And then we got to knit a little tiny bag, which is so cute. And the first thing we knit was a scarf, but then we actually got to knit Nova herself. And this is what she looks like with one of her hats. She doesn't have arms, she has these ponytails, and a beard and a nose and all the contrasting colors around her middle. And she's a gnome that you can play with. You can dress her up, you can give her either the scarf or the bag, and then she has this under hat underneath her outer hat, and then you can put one of the other hats and she changes the way she looks. And then you can use the third hat and then she looks this way. And then you can decide to give her the bag so she can maybe carry her other clothes around or whatever she needs. So that was really, really interesting, and I'm always amazed with the ideas that she comes up with. That's really interesting. So that was that, but then I decided to knit some more gnomes in December, and the reason was that I'm in the process of knitting the film reel socks for every member of my sister's family, immediate family, and the colorway is by Opal. The series is called Cats and Dogs, and every color in this colorway has 2 distinct colors. And I looked at the yarn and I thought that would make nice gnomes, because I could use the lighter part of the yarn for the hats and the darker part of the yarn for the bodies. And then I'll have 2 color gnomes, even though I've just used 1 ball of yarn. And then I decided to do all 8 colors for my sister, but I needed a prototype. So that was the prototype. And then with this one, I thought the color change might be in the right place to just keep knitting, but it didn't really work out. So I also knit this one from the same colorway. And then when I'd finished them all, I realized I knit 1 beard too many. So I needed another gnome to go with the beard, and I decided to use a glitter yarn. This is the first glitter wool yarn gnome that I've knit, and I couldn't find the 2.0 millimeter needle that I use for all those. So I used a 2.5 millimeter needle to knit this gnome. And I think it's so funny how much bigger he is. So my sister's going to get the 8 proper gnomes from the colorways of the series. And my son requested this one. I'm going to keep this one, and my husband gets the big one. So we all have, and this is Naomi. This is also from the No Fun Like Gnome Fun pattern, and this is the ornament sized gnome, which is basically the same size as Noah, but with a rounded bottom, so they're not able to stand. You have to hang them somewhere. And yeah, so I think I knit both of these on the 2.0 millimeter needle. If you compare the 2.0 and the 2.5 millimeter needle, it's the same size difference as those, so I don't really have to show it. But anyway, yeah, and I knit the last one, I think, on the 30th of December, so I made sure it was still in 2022, so he could be part of the lineup of all the gnomes that I knit and gnome-related things that I knit in 2022. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!